That's right. You're listening to another episode of the Co-Main Event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Fulks. We're both longtime MMA journalists, and for nearly the last 13 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Ben, there's big things happening right now with the Co-Main Event. Longtime listeners might or might not realize that May is the month that the CME was born. Way back in 2012. A couple of spry youngsters started this podcast, and frankly, we've grown old right before your very eyes.
Yeah.
And
I like to think that we sprang forth from the skull of the MMA gods fully formed. But then I go back and I listen to some of those early recordings, and it just ain't so.
yeah.
It just ain't so.
Hey, well, look, you go back and listen to it, and we sound like Dana White from the early 2000s. Hey, man, we just hope everyone has a good show today.
Now we're grizzled vets of this game.
Long story short, the CME's 13th birthday is coming up in May, and that means that right here, right now, we are kicking off Pledge Month. This is your opportunity to help the CME. Lend us your support. And who knows, maybe you'll even become part of what we like to call the best little community in all of MMA. Ben, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we are, in fact, as to the best of our knowledge, the longest continually operating MMA podcast in the world. So that's something. But Chad, there's something that I've been thinking about recently, and it's this. The world of MMA discourse is a damn sewer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get on the internet, you want to talk fights with other fans, and right now it kind of doesn't matter which platform you're on, if you're on Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, or if you go into those insane, absolutely unhinged YouTube chat sections of like a live UFC weigh-in stream or something. It's basically guaranteed that in no time at all, some absolute jackanapes will show up and ruin everybody's good time.
Yeah, it's true. It's especially on YouTube. I think we can all agree that the vibes is definitely off on YouTube.
Vibes is off. Yeah. There's one notable exception that I know of, though, Chad.
What's that?
It's thanks to the good patrons of the Co-Main Event podcast. Chad, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. They're good people. You see the way they interact with each other on our Patreon page, patreon.com/co-main event, by the way. You see how they engage. And I'm going to say it, God damn it, even uplift one another over there on the CME Discord where they're talking all kinds of stuff, not just fights. And by the way, that CME Discord is something that all our patrons get access to at any level of patronage. And you go there and you realize that here is at least one place where fight fans and just like-minded individuals can get together, talk about this weird bullshit and a lot of other weird bullshit, have a good time, and even, dare I say it, make friends.
Yeah, that's a good point. I see these people on Instagram being all friendly and shit. I see some CME patrons becoming friends in real life. They get together, they watch the fights in person. Frankly, I find it very heartwarming.
Yeah. No. See, that's what I'm saying. This shit right here is an actual community. And you know what? There's no assholes in that community. So I encourage, in fact, I implore anyone listening to the sound of my voice who is not an asshole and would enjoy talking about fights and any of the other literally dozens of topics being discussed on the CME Discord every day, consider joining up. You can get in for as little as $1 a month, though most of our members opt for the $5 a month package. That's the price of roughly 4 gas station coffees per month. It's nothing. It's barely even money. And you not only get to join the team with some great people, you also do us the honor of supporting our entirely independent and member-sustained podcast empire. There's no corporate bootlicking here. There's no fascist fanboying. There's just honest discourse about everything from MMA to parenting to weightlifting to book reading. Join us. Be welcomed with open arms. Get that warm, fuzzy feeling.
That's right. You guys have heard me say this before. The CME is not part of some larger MMA website. We don't have the support of a big parent company or the corporate fat cats. This show is, as it has always been, just two guys sitting in front of microphones having the conversations about MMA we think you and your buddies are probably having right now. And we've been doing it for a long damn time, and we can only keep doing it with the generous support of our listeners and friends. Right now, we are giving you the opportunity to join our community for half price. That's right. Now through June 1st, throughout Pledge Month, if you are not currently a member, you can get 50% off a new yearly or annual membership at our Patreon page. 50% off. That means you could sign up for a whole year and only pay half price. Just use the coupon code CME13. That's all one word, CME13. When you sign up at patreon.com/co-main event. We'd love to have you and your support. Your generosity can keep the CME going for another 13 years. Ben, do you think we got another 13 years in us?
There's no way I'm going to be alive for another 13 years.
You can also this month save 25% off any order at the CME merchandise shop using the same code, CME13. That's CME13. Go over to our website, comainevent.com, and click the link at the top of the page that says shop. That'll get you 25% off with that code over at the shop. All right. Ian Machado Garry. He pretty much outclassed Carlos Prates over the weekend at their UFC Fight Night main event. Except for that last little part there. Except the last little part. The things got a little white knuckle. We were white knuckling it there to the end with Ian Garry.
By the last little part, you mean most of the 5th round.
Yeah, just the last little tiny part.
Yeah. I hate to invoke Stockton rules. You know that. Mm-hmm. But under Stockton rules, which clearly state you look at who seems like they got their ass whipped the most just based on the appearance of their face, and you ask yourself who would have won if the fight would have continued indefinitely. Carlos Prates won that via Stockton rules. Unfortunately for him, we over here in UFC in the year 2025 are using the unified rules.
Yeah.
And that does not weight the imagined version of this fight that continues on and on. And so while it did seem like he was starting to really get it together, it came way too late. And you know what? Give some credit to Ian Machado Garry on this, because he is a smart fighter.
Yeah.
Like he definitely, like we used to talk about this, remember in the old days where we'd be like, hey, we see guys come in from other disciplines that they then try to adapt for MMA. And then we saw people developing techniques really for MMA. And he's somebody who it seems like he is not only has like the techniques to work with MMA, he has a game plan to work with how MMA actually functions. And he does a really good job of just like stifling other people's offense, of stopping momentum when somebody else seems like they're about to get it. And he doesn't do dumb shit. He makes you have to fight a smart fight in order to beat him, or just be way physically better than he is. And you got to give him his props. I don't know if it's always that much fun to watch when he gets to do his stuff, but it is effective at winning these fights.
Well, yeah, you saw how good he is at taking his opponent totally out of their game pretty much throughout this Carlos Prates fight, except for that last little bit. But for most of it, Carlos Prates wasn't doing shit, man. He didn't do fucking shit in this fight until that last round. And that is not the guy. That is not the Carlos Prates that we had seen in other UFC fights, right? In other UFC fights, he was more of like a stalking predator. He would go out there, kind of walk you down, and eventually, as is the custom of a guy who has Muay Thai tattooed across the front of his chest, he would eventually, work you down and knock you out with his strikes. He couldn't do any of that against Ian Garry for most of this fight. Every time he started to build some momentum, Ian Garry would do something to shut it down. And you saw a lot of Carlos Prates coming forward, but not a lot of Carlos Prates offense throughout most of this fight. And as you said, that is a credit to Ian Garry very smartly mixing up the stuff he was doing, not getting caught against the fence, so Carlos Prates could walk him down as he's done other opponents, mixing in the takedowns, some slick takedowns, by the way, from Ian Garry that you might not expect from a guy like that, and just doing a great job stifling that offense. I will say, though, I think you said this just a second ago, for whatever reason, Ian Garry is able to command our attention. He commands a lot of attention in this sport. And yet I do occasionally get this feeling, despite the fact that I thought this was a pretty compelling fight, I do occasionally get the feeling what we are promised from the Ian Garry experience, let's say, is different than the actual Ian Garry experience that we get in the cage, right? They were talking about this in the fighter meeting on the broadcast. Ian Garry comes in there. He's like, oh, I'm outclass this guy every second of the fight. I can play with my food a little bit in this fight, and which is, basically turned out to be true. But then he's like, Paul Felder, when you want me to finish this one? And Paul Felder was like, I don't know, 10 minutes. And he was like, okay, I got you. No, that's not what he was doing even for a second. He's out there having a smart, tactical, strategical game plan. He's not a bloodthirsty murderer. And I wonder how far that takes him in the eyes of fans.
Well, Sean Strickland's been at it for years, literal years. He's been out here talking like he is the dude from American Psycho, and then going in there and point fighting his way to very narrow decision wins or losses a lot of times. So you can do this for a while.
But isn't Sean Strickland kind of a one-time case? Like, the MMA people knew the deal with Sean Strickland after a few fights. We have talked about Sean Strickland at great length for a long time being that guy. But then this sort of preloaded fan base for Sean Strickland showed up, noobs, you might call them, and they didn't know shit. And so it took them a couple of fights to catch on. I don't necessarily think that's the case with Ian Garry. For starters, I don't think anyone is predisposed to like Ian Garry.
But they don't need to be predisposed to like him. They need to be predisposed to care, to notice him, to remember him, and to give a shit when he fights next. And he has managed to do a pretty good job of that. As we talked about when he was first, I don't know about first, but when he was early on the scene and people were giving him a lot of shit about his relationship with his wife, of all things, all kinds of stuff where like people were very quick to form a lot of opinions about Ian Garry, and not just based on fighting. And so he did do a good job of being a guy who we recognize and remember, and being a guy who forced you to have some kind of feelings about him. And that's half the battle right there. Like, because we've seen other guys where I know I'm gonna piss you off a little bit by mentioning Randy Couture in this conversation. Chael Sonnen's another good example where their fighting styles often were not that exciting to watch, but personality-wise, they had like a magnetic quality to them. They made people want to see them again, or they made people form an opinion one way or the other. And that's what it's about, really. It's like, it's so hard to stand out and to make us remember, and to be somebody where when you're at the top of one of these fight night cards and we see it coming up, we look at the schedule and we go, oh, who's next up on this thing? And it'll be UFC Fight Night blank versus blank. And if you can be one of the blanks that actually becomes a name for us, and that we go, oh shit, this guy, his fights matter. That, like, whether I can clearly articulate why or what I'm going to get out of him or not, I have a sense that his fights matter. That's a lot of the struggle for people. Yeah. And he's kind of got there. What I wonder here is kind of, he comes into this one at number 7 on the UFC's welterweight rankings, and he's only lost one fight. So that's pretty good right there. If you can be in the UFC for any length of time, you've only lost one fight, and that was where you stepped up to fight Shavkat, and that boy Good, as we know, one of the scariest dudes in the division, one of the best dudes not with a belt in the division. And even that one, you acquitted yourself well. I think his stock rose even in defeat in that one. And yet here, you're number 7, you fight number 13. You win him, but as you mentioned, the last little bit, you muddled the line between winning and losing. And you come out of it, and if you're looking at the guys up the ranks from you, it kind of seems like most people already have something on the books, And it's like, how do you move up from where you are? Because right now, Ian Gary is one of those guys where you're like, he's an exciting guy. I don't know if there's if people right now really buy him as a top contender kind of guy. I don't think we're quite there. I think right now people look at him and they go, he's fun to have around, but I do not see a situation in which Ian Machado Garry is UFC welterweight champion. And maybe we would ask ourselves, would that be any fun if he was welterweight champion? And so you got to kind of make that leap. And that's where it seems like it could be tricky.
Really? You think that? I look at this welterweight top 10, let's say, and the people in front of Ian Gary right now are, well, obviously Bilal, who's the champ, Jack Della Maddalena, who's going to fight him coming up at the next UFC, Joaquin Buckley, Kamaru Usman, Leon Edwards, That Boy Good, Shavkat Rakhmonov, and Sean Brady. Those are the people who are in front of Ian Gary on the list right now. Now, a lot of this comes down to timing and scheduling with the UFC right now, just because their live event schedule is so demanding that we're kind of putting these fights together a lot of times on the fly, depending on who is ready and who can go during our next one. So as long as Shavkat Rakhmonov is healthy and ready to go, you have to assume that he will fight the winner of Bilal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena. However, if he's not ready, I wouldn't be surprised to see it be Ian Gary. Off the guys on that list, I got to think Ian Gary's next up, especially since a bunch of those other guys have fights scheduled.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, I also think though that like there's getting a title shot and then there's winning a title shot.
Okay, well that's interesting. How would you think about a fight between, let's say it's Bilal Muhammad and Ian Gary?
I think Bilal wins that. I think that Ian Gary's strengths in terms of fight IQ, Bilal is also a very smart fighter. Like that's, I don't think that's how you're going to beat a guy like Bilal right now. I think you're going to have to beat Bilal by just like physically overwhelming him. And I don't think Ian Gary is that guy.
I think it could be interesting. I don't know. I don't want to be this guy who I keep with Bilal Muhammad being like, oh, he's really good, but he's going to probably lose the next one though, right?
Yeah.
This one that's coming up, he'll probably lose that one. I don't want to be that guy, but I think that they are an interesting stylistic matchup. I would not argue with the fight, even though neither of them have at this point perhaps the reputation for being super exciting. But I don't know. I feel like that has a nice stylistic matchup of those guys together. And of course, any and all discussion probably runs through That Boy Good, Shavkat Rakhmonov, because you got to go through that guy, I think, at the championship level right now, as long as he's healthy. Speaking of fight IQ, however, do you think Carlos Prates lost himself this fight in that 5th round when he had Ian Gary in all kinds of trouble up against the fence and for whatever reason chose to kind of back off and let him stand up again? I thought that was a indefensible decision at that point.
I thought there were a couple questionable decisions that he made in that 5th round. And it made me wonder, what did he think? Where did he think we were at on the scorecards? Did he think, hey, it's close enough that I win this 5th round really clearly and maybe I steal it? Or did he, because if he was thinking, I need a finish or I'm going to lose this, if he really believed that, then yeah, those are some baffling decisions to make. Because also, like, kind of going for a late takedown in the first place, you had him in real trouble, and you could see that Ian Gary was reacting differently than he had early in the fight. Like he had switched into let me survive this, let me make it till the final seconds tick off the clock mode. His arm was hurt, it seemed. You had Carlos Prates' corner trying to tell him that you think he's hurt. You think he's in trouble. He's just trying to get to the end of the round. That's when I think, like, if you believed, hey, I finish or I lose, then you would have gone about it differently. I would have to think, just because the stuff he was doing there toward the final minutes, I was just like, I don't see how you think this leads to a finish in this fight for you. But then again, it's easy to sit here and say that stuff on this side of the cage because maybe he's tired himself. He's by this point, he's already done over 20 minutes of fighting with Ian Gary. So maybe he is also feeling a little physically diminished, even though you're clearly winning that. maybe you just didn't quite have it in you. I mean, one hates to say maybe you were a few cigarettes away from being in the kind of shape to go out there and finish it.
Yeah, the gimmick of being the guy who smokes cigarettes and doesn't sleep at night only works if you are a nightmare. If you are actually a nightmare who's out there finishing people, then you can smoke the cigarettes and talk about how you don't sleep at night and all this other stuff. If you're going out there and having 4 tepid rounds against Ian Garry and then eventually losing the decision, being the guy who smokes the cigarettes isn't as cool anymore.
But see, now you have a comeback story where you'd be like, all right, that was as far as I can go in the UFC while smoking 10 cigarettes a day. And then we start seeing him show up with a Nicorette patch on his arm. And it's like, oh shit, watch out. Carlos Prates he's clean now off the tobacco. And he's coming for everybody.
Speaking of the CME Discord, I believe someone over there after this fight commented, it turns out ripping darts is not the best base for MMA, which that's the kind of discourse you'll get into over there if you get on
now
the
we
CME
know.
Discord.
That's what I'd say about now we know. This is what we all sought out to do here in MMA is like figure out what works and what doesn't. Now we know that maybe smoking a bunch of cigarettes is not how you become a UFC champion.
All right, before we move on from this fight, I did want to read this quote from Ian Garry from the post-fight press conference. I mean, if nothing else, you got to give Ian Garry points for being ambitious. Here is his quote. I'm going to fight the winner at UFC 315. I believe it's Bilal, and that's nothing against Jack. I just believe stylistically, Bilal has what it takes to get this fight done, and quite convincingly. So I'm going to fight Bilal next. I'm going to beat Bilal. Bilal has said many, many times I am the toughest opponent in the division for him. Then, when Bilal doesn't have the belt, there's a certain pound-for-pound number one who wants to come up, and his name is Islam Makhachev. I have nothing but love and respect for that man, his style. It would be an honor to share the octagon with him. I would love to go out there and prove against him in my first title defense that I am number one pound for pound. I beat Islam Makhachev. I take that status as the number one pound for pound fighter. I win my first title defense, and then Shavkat gets the rematch. So Ian Garry is looking down the road a little bit. You gotta, he's looking well into like 2027, probably by that time.
Let me just say this to Ian Garry, who I assume is listening right now. The MMA gods can hear you, bro.
Mm-hmm.
They hear you when you start doing this stuff. Ask Brandon Vera.
Yeah, he rolls over in bed. Brandon Vera can be dead asleep. Somebody starts talking like this. Brandon Vera rolls over in bed and is like, I don't do it. Don't say it. It's like he's having a fucking nightmare.
That guy won 2 or 3 UFC fights when he's talking about how he's going to be a 2-division champion. And the MMA gods were like, oh, okay. You made us laugh by telling us your plans. So, but I honestly, as much as we can make fun of a guy who does this kind of thing and looks way down the road and has this very intricately visualized path for himself, I still prefer it to some I'll fight whoever the UFC gives me ass dude, like getting up there, don't have a name to say, just whatever. I just want to fight. Give me somebody in the top 10. I'll fight whoever. Like boring. That shit is boring. At least this, it's fun,
Yeah, I agree. All right. That wraps up our discussion of Ian Garry versus Carlos Prates. So right now, like we always do about this time, let's get into a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail this week comes to us from Jeremy Hornswoggle.
Okay.
So I assume from the country of Ireland. He writes, did you see this
trip? Jeremy Horn. It's doing like a Jeremy Horn thing, but also
okay. Jeremy Hornswoggle.
That 90s ska band mashup style name.
Putting together two things that do not go together to make a new meaning. I get it now. Did you see this tribute video the UFC put together for Anthony Smith? I'm talking about the one that kicked off with Jelly Roll, the off-brand Post Malone that TKO keeps trying to shove down our throats. Did it not seem a bit over the top to you? No disrespect, long pause. But he was pretty much just a light heavyweight journeyman, wasn't he? Or the best you could say is that he was a gatekeeper. So why does he get showered with love now? Is it just because he's on the broadcast team, or he's in the UFC's good graces for now? Or does it really just help that much to retire in advance? This was both heartwarming. I have to say, when I was watching this live and it happened, it stirred some emotion in me, just being like, oh yeah, Anthony Smith is a good guy. And I'm glad that they are kind of like giving him his moment as he goes out. But it was also very weird because we have seen a lot more accomplished people retire in the cage and not get anywhere close to this kind of in-cage treatment from the UFC. And as much as everybody likes Anthony Smith, as much as it was heartwarming to watch him watch this video and break down in tears and his family is there and everything else, it was kind of glaring in terms of how the UFC normally sends people out.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking is, like, if you are just tuning in as a newer fan, you just saw it on TV, maybe you've been watching the last couple of years, wouldn't you come away from this being like, Anthony Smith must be one of the greats?
Yeah, you kind of would, right? Or like a very important figure in the landscape of the sport. Whereas, was he though?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Is like, I had a bunch of different feelings about it, like very mixed reaction as well. And I was writing a column about it earlier today. But because on one hand, I do think, like, the point about does it help that much to retire in advance, basically to give them a chance to get a little head start on your video package. I do think that matters to some extent, right? Like, I think the UFC has been trying to do a little bit more of this recently. Like, if they know you're going to retire, if you said in advance it's going to be my last one, they are way more likely to go ahead and consider doing something like that. I think that is certainly part of it. Also, though, that point that Dean Thomas made about how the UFC does not give a shit about your retirement fight, still true in terms of matchmaking.
Yeah, they did do him one way that they do normally do to fighters on their way out. They did do that to him.
Yeah, they were like, all right, we're going to give you the love of saying, like, here's a nice video package talking about everything you meant to people. But also, you're going to have to take an ass kicking from a guy we see as, a future prospect in the division. We want to get a little bit of that shine to rub off on him on your way out the door. So you're going to have to get elbowed in your scalp a bunch of times until the blood is streaming down your face. But I also think being on the broadcast team helps a lot, because it just makes it, especially, it helps a lot if you're on the broadcast team and if the fellow broadcasters like you. Like, other people who work in the UFC in one capacity or another have gotten a chance to know you, and then they like that person who they got to know. Because we've seen it go the other way. Some of those guys, they'll get to know you, and they only confirms that you are an a-hole who they do not care for, and you're probably less likely to get this kind of love shown to you. It is, though, a little bit like the moment I saw Jelly Roll, who,
hey man, Jelly Roll he's a big star at this point, Ben. He's got hits on the radio. He's the guy, he gets up at all the award ceremonies and gives the inspirational speeches.
If you say so. All I know is it does seem like he must be an Endeavor client, right? Because TKO has him out there at WrestleMania. We turn around and we're just like, we're leading the Anthony Smith thing with Jelly Roll and a Jelly Roll song. And I'm just kind of like, you guys are trying real hard to make sure that, like, as a TKO branded events, that I care about Jelly Roll, and it's not going to fucking work.
The thing that I assumed must have been the case with Jelly Roll when I saw this, because I agree. When this happened, I was like, oh, we're first guy with the comment is Jelly Roll? Is that he's the first guy the teacher's going to call on here about Anthony Smith? The thing that I assumed was that they must know each other and be friends. Now, I don't know what your Instagram algorithm thinks you like, but one of the things that my Instagram algorithm thinks that I like is random people throwing hands. Okay. So I can tell you that one of the things that is true about Jelly Roll is he's got hands. Like he can mix it up, at least on the pads. I frequently am shown videos of Jelly Roll working the mitts with somebody looking
frequently. You get more than one of these videos.
I've seen it more than one time. Let's say that. So I was wondering, Is Jelly Roll buddies with Anthony Smith? Are they perhaps, and I'm going to use this term incredibly loosely, training partners, in that Jelly Roll might go to the same gym as Anthony Smith?
I mean, the question about like, was he just a light heavyweight journeyman or a gatekeeper or whatever? Like, it is true that if you look at Anthony Smith's career, the most of the big name fighters he fought, he lost to.
Yeah.
You know, he had the one title shot against Jon Jones. You know, like as you said, the MMA world did owe him a debt for not just staying down when he took that blatantly illegal knee to the head, because he could have really forced an uncomfortable situation there.
Don't you think that that could be a huge part of it? That could be like a huge part of why he seems so popular with the UFC, is that he did do that, did not take that opportunity, because you could see that being the kind of thing where Dana White is like, oh, I respect the shit out of this guy. He could have been the champion. He didn't take the easy way out. Like, that could be the kind of thing that could really endear yourself to the people at the UFC who make the decisions, not the least of which is because you saved them like fucking 6 months of a headache that it would have taken to set up a rematch between you and Jon Jones.
Yeah, but that was also 6 years ago. What we've learned about Dana White is when it's just a kind of like, attaboy, I appreciate you doing a stand-up guy kind of thing for us, he tends to forget about those kind of easily. So I don't know if it was just that. I think it's that the UFC people like him. They've gotten to know him. And I think also there's something to be said for fans just over time, if they get to know you, because Anthony Smith is one of these guys where not only is he on the commentary desk at times, but he does like podcast stuff. Like, you get to hear directly from Anthony Smith if you're in this space a lot more than you get to hear from many other fighters. And sometimes you're going to hear some stuff you don't like, but that's just part of it. But I do think that it helps a lot if people feel like they get to know you that way, where you don't just show up every 4 months on TV and then disappear again. They feel like you're kind of in their lives, and you feel like you're in this fandom in a way because you're on there regularly kind of talking about this sport and talking about it in ways that they feel like, this is how I would talk about it if I was down at the Buffalo Wild Wings with my friends, all that kind of stuff. I do think there is a little bit of an interesting lesson though about the way MMA works, in that when you look at like, what are Anthony Smith's biggest wins? I would argue it's Alexander Gustafsson, who he beat in 2019. And then after that, it's Shogun Hua and Rashad Evans, both of whom he beat in 2018. And so it's like his biggest wins were over guys who were big-time guys from the previous era who were on their way down because of age and mileage, basically. And he was able to beat them then. And then he gets to this point where the UFC sees him as, you know, a guy who didn't quite reach the heights that most of those other guys did, but they see him the same way as a guy who built up a name for himself. Now through age and mileage, he's on the way down. And they tried to use him in much the same way for other people as you could argue the UFC did for him with those other guys. And that's just kind of how it works. One day, you know, you're the guy on the come up, and the old dogs are being fed to you, and then the next day you are the old dog food yourself being fed to somebody else, and that's just kind of how it goes. But, you know, I think that it helps when people just sort of like you, except for whoever it was who Anthony Smith is getting into it with.
Yeah.
After that was weird.
I was going to say, this was the classiest retirement you could possibly have, when you end the fight drenched in your own blood and then right away flipping off maybe just some random person in the crowd.
Yeah. When it seemed his comment afterwards was, this guy was standing there saying a bunch of stuff to me as I walked out, saying a bunch of disrespectful stuff, kept yelling at me all through it. And I was emotional after having lost the fight, and I kind of lost it on him. And it's like, first of all, like, I get it. That sucks if you're walking out there and somebody's yelling at you the entire time, telling you that you're garbage or whatever. And then you get beat and you're already mad about it and upset. And then he starts up with it again, and he's standing right there and you could hear him. But also, I would think you'd know in these situations, the last thing you want to do is let that guy even know that you can hear him.
Yeah.
You know, don't give him that satisfaction. Don't ever. It's like you're an outfielder in a baseball game and the right field crowd is heckling you just for fun between beers. Don't acknowledge that you can hear them, because then it's going to get way worse, you know, and you just don't like, you want to make them feel like they are shouting into the void. and all they're doing is being an asshole who annoys the people sitting around them. You don't want to let them know, like, Anthony Smith actually heard me and I made his night worse. Because that, I mean, if you're a big enough asshole to just be shouting at him constantly, like just picking on the guy, like you paid big money to sit up close to do this, like
during his retirement fight,
to be this kind of asshole, like that must be the fulfillment you want out of it, is to be like, to know that you bothered him and you got under his skin. Don't give him that, you know?
Yeah. It still boggles my mind sometimes that people don't seem to understand that they are at a different kind of sport. Like, I feel like some of these hecklers think that they are at the zoo and that the animals are behind bars, or that they're at, like, as you said, a baseball game where you probably can heckle the right fielder and he's not going to run into the stands to try to beat you up. We have seen so many examples of don't talk shit to these guys where they can hear you and where they might get at you, that it surprises me that people just keep doing this shit, man.
Don't make me read Matt Riddle's quote.
That's true.
About how UFC fans are like people going to the Coliseum, because that is kind of it. I'm going to show up at your retirement fight and talk shit to you until you might pick up a javelin and throw it into the crowd.
This next question comes from Bill with 1L, who writes, Eddie Hall clubbed Mariusz Pudzianowski into a living death this weekend. Please discourse this momentous happening. Also, did Puds tap? This was maybe the biggest surprise of the weekend for me. Was really? That all of a sudden, yeah. Did you have Eddie Hall ticketed for the W in this one? Were you sitting around looking at this fight, being like, "Yeah, this is Eddie Hall victory. Eddie Hall's got this one in the bag."
He was way bigger and younger, so
I didn't ever won a fight before this.
He beat those two dudes who were brothers who he fought at the same time. And no, like when you looked at him, I sent you the video because I was watching this one on Saturday afternoon and writing our live blog for Uncrowned, which the live blog, we were talking about it where it was just like, if you're looking at the traffic numbers for like our live blogs in the afternoon, it's like the NFL draft and then this weirdo fight from Poland, because people are interested. It's the kind of fight people are like, oh shit, is that today? I want to find out what happened, but I don't want to pay $13 to watch it or whatever. So people were super interested in this fight. It did command a lot of attention. But also, I sent you the video of Eddie Hall hitting pads backstage, and I was like, that's some of the slowest punching I have ever seen. And yet,
methodical, as I refer to
it. He also had like a nearly 70-pound weight advantage. That's a ton. Like, that's an entirely different weight class. And that makes a big difference, especially where it's like Pudzianowski, yeah, he has more MMA experience by a lot than Eddie Hall, but he's also 48 years old, hadn't fought in a couple years, coming off a couple straight losses, and like to be a nearly 50-year-old man and giving up 70 pounds in weight to a fucking giant ass power lifter. He doesn't need to be all that great. He don't need to be Jon Jones out there. He can just hit you with one punch and toss you around. When he threw him, especially because it's like Eddie Hall came in there, landed like a short right hand, and Pudzianowski tried to go for a takedown, and Eddie Hall just sort of got an overhook on that arm and threw him, Chad, as you would say, like a bag of dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Just tossed him across the cage, straight down into the mat. And Pudzianowski was definitely trying to get us to believe that it was strikes to the back of the head that made the difference in the fight. Because immediately after the fight, he's holding the back of his head and wincing a lot. He's walking around just constantly with his hand on the back of his head, making I can't believe he punched me in the back of the head face. He mentioned it in the interview afterwards that he got hit in the back of the head and couldn't recover. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I could see on the replay where you took a couple shots to the back of the head. Also, it's not like Eddie Hall was like precision guided out. He's just throwing stuff down range, man. He's at one point like hammering, like Pudzianowski's laying there with his head down and his hands are on the mat, and Eddie Hall is somehow missing his head and punching his hands. And you're just like, this is not exactly a technician at work here. So I don't think there was any malice in it. He's just excited seeing a chance to finish this fight and go home, and just throwing punches is pretty much what happened there. But yeah, I mean, as far as if he tapped, it looked to me like the punching was going on for a while with Pudzianowski not moving, not doing anything, not reacting. And the referee kind of tried to get in there, but not forcefully enough to move a 330 something pound man. And so he kept punching a couple times after that. And that's what, like, right as he was shoving Eddie Hall off, it did seem like Pudzianowski tapped.
Yeah. Reason 1542 why AI sucks is that I tried to Google. I was the asshole guy, the fucking noob who's out there Googling what time does Mariusz Pudzianowski versus Eddie Hall start, which, as I said on Twitter, sometimes I hope that some like intern from the FBI is actually monitoring my Google search history. Because then that dude, he's got the fucking shittiest job of being like, now this guy is Googling what time is Eddie Hall versus Mariusz Pudzianowski. The stupid Google AI thing told me the wrong time. And so I'm sitting there minding my own business, scrolling through my social media feeds, and all of a sudden I see the highlight of the fight getting over. Now, as it turned out, I didn't miss anything because the whole fight was like 40 seconds or something like
30
that.
seconds, yeah.
But yeah, fuck you, Google AI, trying to make me miss the most important fight of the year.
That's what you get. That's what you get for trusting the AI, frankly. That's on you.
That's probably true. All right, next question this week is from Rocket Man, who writes, Dana White says he's, quote, super confident they'll get Jones versus Aspinall on the books this year. Does this make you more or less likely to believe we'll actually see that shit in 2025? Side note, LOL at ESPN this weekend. They even got community noted. Has that ever happened to them before? This was a hilarious tweet about Jon Jones.
Yeah.
First of all, even being the undisputed champion at all, like, he is the dictionary definition of being a disputed champion. There is another champion. Like, you can't be undisputed when there is another champion.
Yeah. That's just what the words mean. You know?
Yeah, but also crowing about his title reign or whatever, comparing it to Cain Velasquez. Come on, son.
Yeah, and see, this one was it made me really wonder who did this. You know, because you got to imagine it's like some ESPN social media manager kind of person who's doing it, and it's weird to do because it's like Jon Jones is not really in the news right now, except for when we talk about, is this guy gonna fight Tom Aspinall or not? Like, the only time we were talking about him these days is around a sort of disputed aspect of his title reign. And so to come out of nowhere with, like, let's do a tweet praising Jon Jones and mentioning how incredibly impressive his heavyweight title reign is. And you're just like, was this a person who was just told, come up with a UFC tweet, like a very positive tweet about a UFC fighter? Did somebody tell them, do this about Jon Jones in particular? Like, where did this come from? Because you can't imagine it was somebody who really knows and understands this sport, because there's just so much context missing from that claim. And to get community noted on a thing where you're not even really, it's not like you're like misstating facts. You're not out here dealing in politics or anything. Like, enough people just reacted to your tweet to be like, what the fuck are you guys doing? That you, ESPN, which should not even have a problem just being honest about what is happening in sports, for ESPN to get community noted on something like this, you had to fuck up bad. You had to fuck up bad for people to point out, like, yeah, you can have a long ass heavyweight title reign if you don't defend the belt. If you just sit back and don't fight for a long time, yeah, you can have a long ass title reign. And that is a really weird fuck up on their part. But also, Dana White saying he's super confident. Well, he also said something, a classic Dana White line of, it's all bullshit until you hear it from us. And it's like, except for when it's not, man, except for the many, many times when we have heard shit that turned out to be entirely accurate and true from other sources other than you. And you don't want us to ever acknowledge that. But hearing Dana White be like, I'm super confident we get it done this year. I guess I'm glad to even hear that there is a real sense of urgency about it and about getting it done this year and about making that fight, because that gives me some hope. Like if we were starting to like talk a little bit sideways, if we were starting to do a thing of like Jon Jones is scared, there's ways to turn down a fight without turning down a fight, I'd go, uh-oh. I'd go, if he was like Jon Jones, maybe he's got money now, he's a little risk averse now, I'd be like, oh no, he's setting us up for blaming Jon Jones when this fight doesn't come together. Going out there and saying like, yeah, we're going to get it done. This is the fight that I want most this year. That does make me a little more confident, just because I feel like if the negotiations weren't going at least somewhat well, you're really setting yourself up to look a fool.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It means nothing that Dana White says something like that, except that things aren't so bad with Jon Jones that he would start saying the stuff that you're talking about. But I don't know. It means nothing in terms of whether or not we will actually see this fight. All right, that's going to do it for listener mail this week. If you have a question, comment, or concern that you would like to air to the podcast in future weeks, you know how to do it. Go to the website, co-mainevent.com. Click the link at the top right-hand corner of the screen that says email the podcast. That'll get you in touch with us. Right now, Cool Dusty P's retirement fight is on the books. We'll talk about that right after this. All right, Ben. Well, there was a lot of speculation going back months now as to what fight Dustin Poirier would get as allegedly his last fight in his MMA career, his storied MMA career at this point. It is going down at UFC 318 in New Orleans, Louisiana, fittingly enough, at the Smoothie King Center.
Okay.
And he will be taking on Max Holloway in his final fight, the third fight between those two guys, which I feel like this booking is notable for a couple reasons to me. Reason number one is that, okay, now we know what Dustin Poirier is doing for what is supposed to be his last fight. It's exactly the kind of fight I think we want to see from him in his last fight in the UFC. Nobody in the world is going to argue with him running it back again with Max Holloway, so there's that. And also, this fight is booked for UFC 318 on July 19th, which means it won't be part of UFC 317, which is your International Fight Week UFC fight card, where right now, the only championship fight, the only real big-time fight, if you want to call it that we have on the books is the flyweight championship between Pantoja and Kai Kara France. So if you're not going to put Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway on that card, I think that leaves you with only two options for what could be on that card. And one of them is the aforementioned Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall fight that I think we would all be super surprised to get come end of June, which I think only leaves you with one option, doesn't it?
Yeah, that feels like we're doing Ilia Topuria. And it better be Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. It better not be Ilia Topuria versus some lightweight to try to prove that he's a lightweight contender or whatever. That does seem like the most likely. The Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall one, if we're going to get that, it seems like we're going to get it probably for that fall fight card that they like to do at Madison Square Garden. You know, Jon Jones has been in that one before, and so I think that they would like to save that there. This one, the Dustin Poirier one, like, honestly, I think I love everything about this booking because I love that we're not trying to take Dustin Poirier and feed him into the wood chipper against some young dude, the way we just talked about the UFC loves to do. We're doing a fight that has some history, but a fight against a peer, a fight that feels like, you know, there'll be respect for both guys and for both guys. And it's not like you only need one outcome. Otherwise you get sad, you know, because it's like if Max Holloway were to win one here, get one back against Dustin Poirier on Poirier's way out the door, you'd feel good for Max Holloway. You'd also feel like both guys got to do their stuff. You know, if Dustin Poirier wins and goes out on top like that's nice for him. Also doing it in New Orleans, in Dustin Poirier's home state of Louisiana, that makes a whole lot of sense. It feels like you're set up to have a very nice and memorable night for Dustin Poirier one way or another. And I also like, somebody was saying to me on Twitter, because I said something about how I really liked this as a choice. And they're like, I'd rather see him fight, one of these younger guys kind of with the name. And it's like, but then there's kind of only one way. Like, you don't want to make a fight where there's only one outcome that can feel good.
Yeah.
This one, the guy could win this, and you'd just like sort of respect it for the standalone fight that it is, or for the fight that like connects to their history together and both of their long histories in the sport. So I like it. I think it's a good choice.
It goes without saying that Dustin Poirier will probably get the Anthony Smith post-fight highlight reel treatment. If he doesn't, that'll be very surprising and weird. And in fact, as you mentioned, Dustin Poirier breaking out of the mold here. They're not feeding him to some young contender like they love to do with the guy's last fight. I mean, maybe they already tried to do that with Dustin Poirier a few fights ago, and he kind of put it in their face. But,
and maybe they also were thinking about doing it here, because it's been sort of an ongoing talk. Like Dustin Poirier has said for a while that he's got this like one more, and so it seemed like maybe the UFC was casting about a little bit to find him one last fight because Dustin Poirier is not so dumb that he'll be like, sure, just give me whoever and I'll say yes to it. Like he has enough pull these days that he could probably say no to some options and wait for something good to come around.
Yeah, as I assume that's probably true. This will be a good fight, a fitting way for Dustin Poirier to go out. And it'll almost certainly be fireworks, as everybody wants to see in the final fight from that guy. Did you see Dustin Poirier at the NFL draft over the weekend announcing a pick for the New Orleans Saints?
I saw it because I saw the big homie Ariel Helwani was over there announcing a pick for the Buffalo Bills. So, they got to run into each other out there. I mean, this is where us being just big fans of the Montana Grizzlies makes it. I don't see a path for us, Chad. I don't see how we ever end up announcing any picks at the NFL draft. I think
waiting for that
dream
Montana expansion team.
I will say this:
we could announce a pick at like the Arena Football Draft.
Okay, yeah,
for whatever off-brand team they've got out in Billings at this
Billings point. Outlaws or something. Yeah. The NFL draft stuff I enjoy. So I follow the Montana Grizzlies football Instagram page, and they'll make these special slides for guys where it's just like, Junior Bergen, our standout wide receiver and kick returner. He got drafted quite late. 7th round by the San Francisco 49ers. They're going to be like, congratulations, Junior Bergen got drafted. And then there'll be a couple of guys where it's like, didn't get drafted, but signed. This guy got like signed as a free agent to go out and, at least get a shot on somebody's team. And then I saw one most recently, like this morning, where it was one of the offensive linemen, and they were like, he got a camp invite for the Seattle Seahawks. And I was just like, okay. It's nice, I guess, to get the camp invite, but when it's like the draft weekend came and went, the period of signing undrafted free agents came and went, and they said, hey, if you're not busy, you could meet us at camp in Spokane or whatever in June or July. If you can't make it, that's fine too.
I feel like it's good to get invited to an NFL camp.
I mean, I guess it's better than not getting invited at all, but it also just feels like, okay, the camp invite. Sure.
I don't know. I would have been pretty happy to get a camp invite if it was me.
Maybe you still will.
Maybe I still can. Yeah. Okay. Here's my thought process. This is how my brain works. Okay. We started talking about Dustin Poirier and Ariel Helwani announcing NFL draft picks. And that made me think of Seth Rollins coming out to announce a draft pick for the Chicago Bears with the Chicago Bears championship belt over his shoulder, and then cut a heel promo on the mic about how much Green Bay sucks. And then that made me think of how I meant to bring up earlier the heel promo that Zhang Minyong cut after the Anthony Smith fight. This is, chef's kiss. I loved everything about this, especially the part where he gets on the mic through his, and he says, hey, Kansas City, how you feeling? Boo me more, he says. I want to hear it. And then they start booing him. And then he does like the evil heel laugh while it's happening. He's like, ha, 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 ha. Just like, I couldn't love what this guy is doing anymore.
Yeah. I like how he learned enough English to be like, if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah.
and delivered it, but like with a smile on his face, like very gleeful, very like happy and jovially the entire time. Yeah, that was great. And that is like, if you're the UFC, you're kind of going, this couldn't have gone any better for how we planned it, right? Like we wanted to get this new young guy a win over somebody who get people paying attention. So we feed Anthony Smith to him. We're gonna placate Anthony Smith and give him a jelly roll video beforehand, and then he's gonna have to go out there and get elbowed in his head a whole bunch, and then this guy is gonna get to cut his promo, and now we know who the hell he is. Now we're paying attention, and it all worked, honestly.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, his next fight is appointment viewing for me because I want to hear another heel promo and then to see him basically do the $1 million man laugh.
Well, and also because what the hell else do we have going on in the light heavyweight division these days?
Just teach me enough English so I can talk shit on the mic is a tremendous approach. I love that.
Yeah.
Coming up this weekend, Ben, we're going to Des Moines, Iowa, Wells Fargo Arena. We should get the big homie Dan Brooks to come on next week and talk about the excitement that has to be brewing over a fight night card in his hometown of Des Moines. Main event, bantamweight, men's bantamweight, Corey Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. Maybe even of more interest to me, the co-main, Rainier de Ritter and Bo Nickel. Bo Nickel getting a co-main slot on a fight night in Des Moines, which on one hand seems like kind of an insult. No offense to Des Moines. But on the other hand, you're trying to work that Midwestern charm on us. You want to put a guy on there who's going to bring the people out to the Great Plains, and that's probably Bo Nickel.
Well, also, as Rainier de Ritter said, no one wants to see us go out there and get in a half-ass boxing match. They want to see us get some grappling, and who loves them some grappling? Just people culturally. Yeah.
The fine people of Iowa. Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of cauliflower ear in that crowd. And so if anybody's going to appreciate the young, unheralded Bo Nickel showing up out of nowhere, I think it's going to be these people. That makes some sense. There'll probably be some people in that crowd with singlets on under their clothes just in case.
Also on this card, Jeremy Stevens.
Oh, yeah.
He left the UFC, right?
Yeah, he was in BKFC and stuff.
Yeah, he fought BKFC. He was announced as part of the GFL in December, and now here he is. He's back in the UFC.
Going to bask in the hometown love of Des Moines, Iowa.
He's going to fight former Cage Warriors lightweight and welterweight champion Mason Jones. He's going to be making his return to the UFC. So interesting matchmaking there. All right. That's going to do it this week for the Co-Main Event podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate the support. Do not forget that it is Pledge Month. Now is the time to show your support for independent MMA discourse, keeping it unfettered over here. You can get 50% off on a new monthly or annual subscription at patreon.com/co-main event. Just go over there and use the promo code CME13. That's CME13. Get it? Because the podcast turns 13.
I get it.
Lucky 13 in May is what we're turning. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you in the community. Give us a shot. You won't regret it. How's that for a guarantee? You will not regret it.
0 chance of regret.
In fact, you will regret it more if you don't. You will regret the things you did not do.
Yeah, you will certainly live with that regret of not signing up ever to become a patron. It'll be rough for you. I won't lie.
Yeah,
you'll have a rough road from here on out.
You'll be able to point to that as the time when things took a dark turn for you in your life.
You'll be in hospice care.
Jesus Christ.
Decades from now, thinking about how bad you fucked up.
All right, we're wrapping it up there. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you're a patron, we'll see you on Wednesday. If you're not, we'll see you right back here next week. As for right now, we are done. We are through. We are out. Did you see that the fight of the night returned?
Yeah, how about that?
This is one of the things I've had my finger on the pulse of this one. So right away, after it was over, I had to go to the internet to see if we awarded a fight of the night, and we did indeed. Randy Brown and Nicholas Dalby got the fight of the night.
Randy Brown hit him with that one hitter quitter.
Mhm.
But it does say, all right, so you're telling me when we did 4 straight fight night events with no fight of the night, it wasn't a policy change. You just thought that those fights sucked?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm thinking maybe the best theory at this point is that they either forgot about the fight of the night, or whoever was around, it was just like the person who chooses fight of the night wasn't around, like they were on vacation.
No one gets to go on that long a vacation at the UFC.
Fight of the night guy was out for a month. Couldn't give the fight of the night without fight of the night guy.